In the marble-lined boardroom of a Chicago investment firm, a 79-year-old financial analyst was about to make the most dangerous decision of her life. What started as a routine family dinner discussion about quarterly reports would end with Rachel Morrison discovering that everything she believed about her family's multi-million-dollar construction empire was built on a foundation of lies, fraud, and intimidation. When she was ordered to stay quiet about what she'd uncovered, Rachel had no idea she was about to expose a decades-long conspiracy that would bring down one of the Midwest's most respected business dynasties. The Morrison family name had graced construction sites across 3 states for 40 years. But behind the gleaming corporate headquarters and charitable foundation galas lurked a web of shell companies, fraudulent contracts, and unpaid debts that stretched back to Rachel's grandfather's first government deal. When Rachel stumbled upon financial irregularities that could destroy everything her family had built, her father and uncle delivered an ultimatum that would change her life forever. What began as a daughter's concern about suspicious accounting entries would become a battle for her soul, her future, and her understanding of right and wrong. The Chicago business world would never be the same after Rachel Morrison chose truth over family loyalty and discovered that sometimes the people who raised you to have integrity are the same ones who've been living without it for decades. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Rachel Morrison's hands trembled slightly as she stared at the computer screen in her cramped office on the 23rd floor of Hartwell & Associates. The spreadsheet that glowed before her contained numbers that didn't make sense, patterns that defied logic, and financial flows that seemed designed to obscure rather than illuminate. As a forensic accountant specializing in construction industry audits, Rachel had seen her share of creative bookkeeping. But this was different. This was personal. The Morrison Construction Group audit had landed on her desk 3 weeks ago, assigned by her supervisor, who'd noted her surname with a knowing smile. "Conflict of interest disclosure filed," he'd said, sliding the manila folder across his desk. "But since you're the best we have at untangling construction finances, and since your family requested you specifically, we're moving forward." Rachel had protested initially. Auditing her own family's business felt wrong, even with proper disclosure protocols. But her father, William Morrison, had been insistent during their monthly dinner at Gibson's Steakhouse. "We want transparency," he'd said, cutting into his prime rib with surgical precision, "and who better to ensure everything's above board than my own daughter? You know we run a clean operation." That conversation had been 3 weeks ago. Now, staring at financial records that painted a very different picture, Rachel wished she'd trusted her initial instincts. The Morrison Construction Group's books were a masterpiece of misdirection. On the surface, everything appeared legitimate. A thriving family business with steady contracts, reasonable profit margins, and a solid reputation built over 4 decades. But Rachel's trained eye had begun to notice discrepancies that made her stomach churn with each new discovery. Shell companies with names like Midwest Development Partners and Great Lakes Infrastructure Solutions appeared throughout the financial records, receiving payments for services that seemed to duplicate work already billed by Morrison's primary contractors. When Rachel tried to trace these companies, she found registration addresses that led to empty office buildings and phone numbers that rang to automated voicemails. More troubling were the patterns in Morrison's government contracts. The company had an unusually high success rate in winning public works projects, often underbidding competitors by margins that should have been financially impossible. Yet somehow, Morrison consistently delivered these projects profitably, a feat that defied basic construction economics. Rachel pulled up the Illinois Department of Transportation contract from 2019, a $12 million highway expansion project that Morrison had won with a bid 15% lower than the next closest competitor. The project had been completed on time and under budget, according to the official reports. But when Rachel examined the subcontractor payments, she found invoices for work that appeared to be double-billed, once to Morrison's official subcontractors and again to shell companies that existed only on paper. Her phone buzzed with a text from her younger brother Tyler. "Family dinner Sunday. Dad's making his famous ribs. Don't be late, or Uncle Frank will eat your share." The casual normalcy of the message felt surreal against the backdrop of what Rachel was uncovering. Tyler worked in Morrison's project management division, fresh out of Northwestern with an engineering degree and boundless enthusiasm for the family business. Did he know? Had he seen the same discrepancies Rachel was discovering? Rachel's expertise in forensic accounting had made her valuable to Hartwell and Associates, but it had also given her the skills to recognize fraud when she saw it. The Morrison Construction Group wasn't just cutting corners or engaging in aggressive tax strategies. Someone was systematically siphoning money from government contracts using a network of fake companies designed to mask the theft. Now, the scope was staggering. Rachel's preliminary calculations suggested that over the past 5 years, Morrison Construction had overbilled various government agencies by at least $8 million, money that had been funneled through shell companies and ultimately disappeared into accounts she couldn't trace. The complexity of the scheme suggested years of planning and intimate knowledge of both construction industry practices and government contracting procedures. But the most damning evidence was sitting in a folder marked Executive Discretionary. Rachel had almost overlooked it, buried deep in the company's internal financial records. The folder contained authorization codes for payments to shell companies, and every authorization bore the electronic signature of either William Morrison or his brother, Frank Morrison, the company's vice president of operations. Rachel leaned back in her chair, staring at the Chicago skyline through her office window. The Morrison Construction Group's headquarters was visible from here, a gleaming testament to 4 decades of family success. Her grandfather, Robert Morrison, had started the company in 1983 with a single truck and a willingness to work 18-hour days. By the time Rachel was born, Morrison Construction was bidding on major infrastructure projects across the Midwest. Growing up, Rachel had been proud of her family's success. William Morrison was respected in Chicago's business community, serving on the boards of 3 charitable foundations and regularly quoted in construction industry publications. Frank Morrison was known for his engineering expertise and had lectured at the University of Illinois on sustainable construction practices. The Morrison name meant something in Chicago: integrity, quality, and community commitment. Now Rachel wondered how much of that reputation was built on stolen money. Her computer chimed with an incoming email from her supervisor, Mark Hendricks. Status update on Morrison audit? Client is requesting preliminary findings by Friday. Rachel stared at the message, her cursor blinking in the empty reply field. What was she supposed to say? That her family's business appeared to be running a sophisticated fraud operation? That her father and uncle might be criminals? Rachel's background in forensic accounting had taught her to separate emotional reactions from factual analysis. But separating herself emotionally from evidence that implicated her own family was proving impossible. Every fraudulent payment authorization, every shell company registration, every overbilled government contract represented a betrayal not just of public trust, but of everything she'd believed about the people who raised her. The irony wasn't lost on her that William Morrison had specifically requested her for this audit. Had he genuinely believed the books were clean? Was this elaborate fraud hidden even from him? Or had he calculated that his own daughter would be less likely to report irregularities that could destroy the family business? Rachel pulled up Morrison Construction's most recent tax filings, cross-referencing them against the shell company payments she'd discovered. The tax documents showed charitable contributions totaling $400,000 last year, donations that had enhanced the Morrison family's reputation as civic-minded business leaders. But those donations represented less than 5% of the money Rachel estimated had been stolen from taxpayers through fraudulent billing practices. The Morrison Family Foundation, which provided scholarships to children of construction workers, had received $150,000 from the company last year. Rachel had attended the foundation's annual gala, watching her father present scholarships to deserving students, while the crowd applauded the Morrison family's generosity. Now she wondered if those scholarships were being funded with stolen money. Watching Curving 4, her phone rang, startling her from her analysis. The caller ID showed her father's office number. "Rachel, sweetheart." William Morrison's voice carried its usual warmth and authority. "How's the audit coming along? I hope we're not giving you too much trouble with our record keeping." Rachel's throat felt dry. "It's thorough work, Dad. Lots of detail to review." "I'm sure it is. Listen, your mother wanted me to remind you about Sunday dinner. She's making that apple pie you love, and Frank will be there with Jennifer and the kids. We haven't had the whole family together in months." The casual mention of Frank Morrison sent a chill down Rachel's spine. Her uncle would be there, the man whose electronic signature had authorized millions in fraudulent payments. Would he look her in the eye and ask about her work? Would he wonder what she'd discovered? "I'll be there," Rachel said, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. "Excellent. And Rachel, I know this audit situation is a bit unusual, mixing family and business. But I want you to know how proud I am of you. Your integrity and attention to detail are exactly why Morrison Construction has the reputation it does. We've got nothing to hide." After her father hung up, Rachel sat in the gathering darkness of her office, surrounded by evidence that contradicted everything he'd just said. William Morrison was either the most naive businessman in Chicago, or he was lying to his own daughter with the casual confidence of someone who'd been doing it for years. Rachel's training told her to document everything, prepare a preliminary report, and let the evidence speak for itself. But her heart told her that following protocol would destroy her family, end her father's career, and potentially send the people she loved to prison. As she prepared to leave the office, Rachel made copies of the most damning evidence, storing them on an encrypted drive that she slipped into her purse. She wasn't sure what she planned to do with the information, but she knew that once she walked into Sunday dinner, everything would change. Either she would find a way to rationalize what she'd discovered, or she would have to decide whether her loyalty to her family was stronger than her commitment to the truth. The Chicago streets glittered with evening traffic as Rachel walked to her car, carrying the weight of knowledge that felt heavier than the briefcase in her hand. In 3 days, she would sit across from her father and uncle at the family dinner table, surrounded by the warmth and laughter that had defined her childhood. But now she knew that the foundation of that warmth had been built on a lie that was about to destroy everything. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sunday dinner at the Morrison family estate in Winnetka had always been Rachel's sanctuary. The sprawling Tudor-style home overlooked Lake Michigan, its manicured gardens and stone terraces representing 4 decades of construction industry success. Tonight, however, the familiar warmth of her childhood home felt oppressive, every family photograph and achievement award on the walls now seeming like evidence of a carefully constructed facade. Rachel arrived precisely at 6 o'clock, her laptop bag heavy, with printed financial records and the encrypted drive containing copies of the most damaging evidence. She'd spent the weekend wrestling with how to approach the conversation, ultimately deciding that direct confrontation was the only way forward. Her forensic accounting training had taught her that financial fraud rarely remained hidden once someone started asking the right questions. Rachel! Her mother, Patricia Morrison, embraced her at the front door with the enthusiasm that had made her a beloved figure in Chicago's charity circuit. Perfect timing. Your father just finished with the ribs, and Tyler brought his new girlfriend. You'll love her. She's a teacher. The domestic normalcy felt surreal. Patricia had spent her afternoon preparing apple pie and arranging flowers from her garden, completely oblivious to the financial crimes that had funded their comfortable lifestyle. As they walked through the marble-floored foyer toward the family room, Rachel wondered how her mother would react to learning that their charitable donations and community standing were built on stolen taxpayer money. Frank Morrison stood near the fireplace, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand as he gestured animatedly while telling a story to Tyler and a petite brunette, who must be the new girlfriend. Frank had always been the more gregarious Morrison brother, quick with jokes and construction industry war stories that made him popular at company gatherings. Tonight, knowing what she knew about his role in the fraud scheme, his easy confidence struck Rachel as either remarkable acting or sociopathic indifference. Rachel! Frank's booming voice filled the room as he spotted her. There's my favorite niece. I hear you're putting us through the financial ringer at work. Find any skeletons in our closets yet? The question, delivered with Frank's characteristic laugh, made Rachel's blood run cold. Was he testing her? Did he suspect what she'd discovered? Or was this just his typical attempt at humor, unknowingly touching on the very secrets that could destroy him? Still working through the details, Rachel replied carefully, accepting a glass of wine from her father. Forensic accounting takes time to get right. William Morrison studied his daughter's face with the perceptive gaze that had made him successful in negotiations. "You seem tense tonight, sweetheart. Everything okay at work?" This was her opening. Rachel had rehearsed various approaches, but standing in her family's living room surrounded by the people she loved most, the words felt impossible to speak. How do you tell your father that you've discovered evidence of his crimes? How do you look your uncle in the eye and ask him to explain why his signature authorized millions in fraudulent payments? "Actually, Dad, there are some things I need to discuss with you and Uncle Frank about the audit," Rachel said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Some irregularities I found that need explanation." The room's energy shifted subtly. Tyler looked up from his conversation with his girlfriend, sensing tension without understanding its source. Patricia paused in arranging the dinner plates, her maternal instincts picking up on the change in her daughter's tone. Frank's jovial expression remained fixed, but his eyes sharpened with sudden attention. "Irregularities?" William set down his wine glass with deliberate care. "What kind of irregularities?" Rachel pulled a manila folder from her laptop bag, her hands trembling slightly as she opened it to reveal financial printouts covered with her highlighter marks and handwritten notes. Shell companies receiving duplicate payments for work already billed by primary contractors. Government contracts won with impossibly low bids that somehow remained profitable. Financial flows designed to obscure rather than document legitimate business expenses. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia dropped a dinner plate, the crash of ceramic against marble echoing through the room like a gunshot. Tyler's girlfriend looked around in confusion, clearly sensing that she'd stumbled into a family crisis beyond her understanding. Frank Morrison was the first to speak, his voice losing its casual warmth. "Rachel, honey, I think you might be misunderstanding some of our more complex business arrangements. Construction finance can be complicated, especially when you're dealing with multiple subcontractors and varying project timelines." "I understand construction finance perfectly," Rachel replied, her professional training taking over. "I've audited dozens of construction companies. This isn't complex business arrangements, Uncle Frank. This is systematic fraud." William Morrison moved to the windows overlooking the lake, his shoulders rigid with tension. When he turned back to face his daughter, his expression was unreadable. "Tyler, why don't you and—" He gestured toward the girlfriend. "Amanda." Tyler supplied quietly. "Amanda, why don't you two go help your mother in the kitchen? Rachel, Frank, and I need to discuss some business matters." Tyler started to protest that he worked for the company and should be included in business discussions, but something in his father's tone stopped him. He guided Amanda toward the kitchen, shooting a worried glance back at his sister. Once they were alone, the pretense of family dinner civility evaporated. Frank moved to the bar and poured himself another whiskey, his movements sharp with barely controlled anger. William remained by the windows, staring out at the lake as if searching for answers in the darkening water. "How much do you know?" William asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. The question confirmed Rachel's worst fears. Her father wasn't going to deny the fraud or express shock at her discoveries. He was admitting guilt while trying to assess the damage. "I know about Midwest Development Partners, Great Lakes Infrastructure Solutions, and at least 6 other shell companies," Rachel said, consulting her notes with forced professionalism. "I know about the overbilling on the IDOT highway project, the duplicate invoicing on the Chicago Public Schools renovation contracts, and the systematic inflation of material costs on federal projects dating back to 2018. Frank laughed bitterly, downing his whiskey in one gulp. 5 years. We've been doing this for 5 years, and our own family member is the one who catches us." "Frank, shut up," William snapped, but his brother was already beyond caring about discretion. "No, Bill, she's got us. Look at those files. She's documented everything. The question now is what we're going to do about it." Rachel felt like she was watching her family disintegrate in real time. These weren't the men who'd taught her about integrity and hard work. These were criminals discussing damage control strategies. "Why?" Rachel asked, her voice breaking slightly. "The company was successful. You didn't need to steal money. Why risk everything for fraud? William finally turned from the window, his face aged by the weight of confession. Successful companies don't stay successful by playing fair, Rachel. Our competitors were cutting corners, bribing officials, falsifying compliance reports. We started small, just padding some invoices to match what everyone else was doing. But once you cross that line, it becomes easier to cross it again, Frank finished, and again. And the amounts get bigger, because you need bigger margins to stay competitive with other companies doing the same thing. So you decided to steal from taxpayers to maintain your profit margins? Rachel's anger was building now, overwhelming her shock and disappointment. We decided to level the playing field, Frank shot back. Do you know how much money gets wasted on government projects? How much bureaucratic incompetence costs taxpayers every year? We're providing better value than any of our competitors, even with our adjusted billing. Adjusted billing? Rachel's voice rose. You mean fraud? You mean theft? You mean criminal conspiracy? William held up his hands, attempting to regain control of the conversation. Rachel, I understand you're upset, but you need to understand the bigger picture here. Morrison Construction employs 247 people. We support 247 families. We contribute to dozens of charities. We're pillars of this community. What you're talking about could destroy all of that. What I'm talking about is reporting financial crimes to the appropriate authorities, Rachel replied. What I'm talking about is fulfilling my professional and ethical obligations. The room fell silent again, but this time the silence felt dangerous. Frank and William exchanged a look that communicated years of partnership and shared secrets. When William spoke again, his voice carried an authority that reminded Rachel of her childhood, when his word was law in the Morrison household. Rachel, you're going to finish your audit, and you're going to file a clean report. I'm going to do what? You're going to stay quiet about what you think you've found, Frank added, his voice hardening. Because you're family, and family protects family. Rachel stared at her father and uncle, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time. The men who'd raised her to value honesty and integrity were ordering her to participate in covering up their crimes. And if I refuse? William's expression grew cold. Then you'll learn what happens to people who threaten everything this family has built. The threat hung in the air like smoke from Frank's cigarette. Rachel realized that she wasn't just dealing with financial fraud anymore. She was dealing with people who were willing to do whatever it took to protect their secrets, even if it meant threatening their own family. Patricia's voice called from the dining room, oblivious to the confrontation happening just feet away. Dinner's ready. Rachel, bring your father and uncle. The ribs are getting cold. Rachel looked at the two men who'd shaped her understanding of right and wrong, who taught her to stand up for her principles, who were now demanding that she abandon those principles to protect their criminal enterprise. I need time to think, she said finally. You have until tomorrow morning, William replied. Hartwell and Associates is expecting your preliminary report by end of business Monday. That report will indicate that Morrison Construction's financial practices are in full compliance with industry standards and legal requirements. As Rachel gathered her files and prepared to leave without staying for dinner, she realized that the family she'd known her entire life had never really existed. The Morrison family values, the integrity that had been drilled into her since childhood, the moral foundation that had guided her career choices, all of it had been a lie designed to hide the truth about who her father and uncle really were. Walking to her car in the gathering darkness, Rachel understood that she faced an impossible choice: betray her professional ethics to protect criminals who happened to be family, or expose the truth and destroy everyone she'd ever loved. But as she drove away from the house where she'd grown up, one thing was becoming clear. The people who'd ordered her to stay quiet had underestimated the daughter they'd raised to value truth above all else. Rachel's Monday morning began at 5:47 a.m. with her phone buzzing incessantly on her nightstand. Half awake, she fumbled for the device, expecting her usual alarm. Instead, she found 17 missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize, 12 voicemails, and a string of text messages that made her blood run cold. The first voicemail was from Detective Maria Santos of the Chicago Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. Ms. Morrison, this is Detective Santos. We need to speak with you regarding some allegations that have come to our attention about Morrison Construction Group. Please call me back immediately. Rachel sat up in bed, her heart pounding. Someone had already contacted the police? Had her father and uncle panicked after Sunday's confrontation and tried to get ahead of the story? Or had someone else discovered the fraud independently? The second voicemail provided a chilling answer. The voice was electronically distorted, clearly disguised. Rachel Morrison, you have something that doesn't belong to you. Return all documents related to your audit and forget what you think you've learned. This is your only warning. Rachel's hands shook as she scrolled through the remaining messages. Anonymous threats mixed with legitimate-sounding calls from IRS investigators and federal auditors requesting immediate meetings. The pattern was clear. Someone was trying to overwhelm her with fear and confusion, making it impossible to distinguish real threats from fabricated ones. Her apartment's landline rang, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet morning. Rachel let it go to voicemail, but the caller left a message that made her question everything she thought she knew about her situation. Rachel, this is Jennifer Walsh from the Chicago Tribune's investigative desk. We've received information about potential fraud at Morrison Construction, and we understand you may have relevant documentation. We'd like to offer you protection in exchange for your cooperation. Please call me at the Tribune. How had reporters gotten involved? Rachel's mind raced through possibilities. Had someone leaked her discoveries? Was this part of a coordinated campaign to pressure her into silence? Or was there genuinely an independent investigation underway? Rachel's personal phone buzzed with an incoming call from Tyler. Against her better judgment, she answered. Rachel, what the hell is going on? Her brother's voice was tight with panic. Dad called me at 6 this morning telling me not to talk to anyone from outside the company. The security team changed all the locks at headquarters, and there are lawyers in the conference room. Did something happen with your audit? The innocence in Tyler's voice confirmed what Rachel had suspected. Her younger brother had no knowledge of the fraud scheme. He was as much a victim of their father's deception as she was, but now he was being dragged into the cover-up without understanding why. Tyler, listen to me carefully, Rachel said, moving to her apartment window to check for any suspicious vehicles on the street below. Don't sign anything, don't talk to anyone you don't know, and don't discuss the company with anyone outside the family. Not until we figure out what's happening. You're scaring me, Rachel. Is the company in trouble? Are we in trouble? Before Rachel could answer, she spotted a black SUV parked across from her building, its engine running despite the warm October morning. Two men in suits sat in the front seats, one speaking into a phone while keeping his eyes fixed on her apartment building's entrance. Tyler, I have to go. Just be careful who you trust right now. Rachel ended the call and immediately dialed her supervisor at Hartwell & Associates. Mark Hendricks answered on the first ring, his usually calm demeanor replaced by obvious stress. Rachel, thank God, where are you? Don't come into the office today. We've had visitors this morning asking questions about your Morrison audit. What kind of visitors? The kind that show badges and ask to review all your work files. The kind that make our legal department very nervous. Rachel, what exactly did you find in those Morrison records? Rachel's throat felt dry. Mark, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Did you or anyone else at the firm discuss my audit findings with outside parties? Absolutely not. Client confidentiality is sacred here, you know that. But Rachel, if there's criminal activity involved, we have legal obligations. The firm can't be seen as complicit in covering up fraud. The message was clear. Hartwell & Associates would protect itself, even if it meant sacrificing Rachel's career. She was on her own. After ending the call, Rachel spent the next hour systematically documenting everything that had happened since Sunday dinner. The threatening calls, the mysterious SUV, the police contact, the reporter's message. Someone was orchestrating a campaign designed to either terrify her into silence or manipulate her into making a mistake. Her laptop chimed with an incoming email from an address she didn't recognize. rachelmorrison.accountability@protonmail.com. The subject line read, Your family's victims deserve justice. The email contained a single attachment, a spreadsheet listing Morrison Construction's government contracts over the past 5 years, cross-referenced with estimated overbilling amounts. But this wasn't Rachel's analysis. Someone else had been investigating her family's company, and their findings were even more damning than her own discoveries. The mysterious investigator had identified $12.4 million in fraudulent billing, money stolen from projects that included elementary school renovations, veterans' hospital construction, and infrastructure repairs in low-income neighborhoods. Each line item represented taxpayer funds diverted from essential public services to pad the Morrison family's profits. A second email arrived within minutes. Ms. Morrison, you're not alone in this. If you're willing to testify about what you've found, we can protect you. But time is running out. Your family is preparing to destroy evidence and silence witnesses. Choose carefully. A friend. Rachel stared at the cryptic message, trying to decode its implications. Who was this friend? How did they know about her audit findings? And most importantly, could she trust them when everyone else in her life seemed to be lying? Her phone rang again, this time displaying her mother's number. Rachel hesitated before answering, unsure whether Patricia Morrison was a victim or a co-conspirator. Rachel, sweetheart, where are you? Patricia's voice carried a maternal concern that seemed genuine. Your father is worried sick. He said you left Sunday dinner upset, and now there are all these strange people calling the house asking questions about the business. Mom, what do you know about Dad's business practices? The pause that followed told Rachel everything she needed to know. It lasted too long, carried too much weight, and when Patricia finally spoke, her voice had changed. Rachel, your father is a good man who's worked very hard to provide for this family. Sometimes business involves making difficult decisions that people on the outside might not understand. Mom, did you know about the fraud? Another pause, shorter this time. I know that your father has always put this family first. And I know that sometimes protecting the people you love requires making sacrifices. The revelation hit Rachel like a physical blow. Her mother, the woman who taught her about honesty, integrity, and doing the right thing, had known about the criminal enterprise all along. Patricia Morrison wasn't an innocent victim. She was a willing participant who'd chosen to look the other way in exchange for a comfortable lifestyle. Rachel, you need to come home so we can discuss this as a family, Patricia continued. There are things you don't understand, complexities about business and family responsibility that, Mom, I can't do this right now. Rachel ended the call and immediately blocked her mother's number, along with her father's and uncle's. The people who'd raised her, who'd shaped her moral foundation, who'd taught her to value truth above comfort, were now asking her to abandon those principles to protect their criminal enterprise. But as she sat in her apartment, surrounded by evidence of fraud and receiving threatening messages from unknown sources, Rachel realized that her family's betrayal might be the least of her problems. Someone else was watching, investigating, and manipulating events from the shadows. The question was whether this mysterious ally was genuinely interested in justice, or whether she was being played by forces even more dangerous than her own family. Her laptop chimed with a third email from the anonymous sender. Ms. Morrison, your family has been in contact with individuals who specialize in making problems disappear. If you value your safety, you need to act quickly. Meet me tonight at Millennium Park, near the Bean, 9 p.m. Come alone and bring copies of everything you found. This is your only chance to get ahead of what's coming. Rachel stared at the message, her finger hovering over the delete button. Every instinct told her that meeting an anonymous contact in a public park was dangerous, possibly deadly. But every alternative seemed worse. Staying silent while criminals escaped justice, trusting a family that had already betrayed her, or waiting for specialists in making problems disappear to find her. As the October sun climbed higher over Chicago, Rachel Morrison faced a choice that would determine not just her future, but potentially her survival. The family business she'd uncovered wasn't just about financial fraud. It was about people who would do anything to protect their secrets, including eliminating the daughter who'd discovered them. The black SUV was still parked across the street, its occupants maintaining their patient surveillance. But now Rachel wondered if they were there to intimidate her, protect her, or worse, to ensure she never had the chance to expose what she'd learned. The clock on her laptop showed 8:43 a.m. She had 12 hours to decide whether to trust a stranger with her life or to find another way to escape the trap that was closing around her. At 8:47 p.m., Rachel Morrison sat in her Honda Civic in the Millennium Park parking garage, her hands gripping the steering wheel as she watched late-evening joggers and tourists move through the illuminated pathways. The encrypted USB drive containing copies of all her audit findings lay heavy in her jacket pocket, along with a small digital recorder she'd purchased that afternoon. If this mysterious meeting was a trap, she wanted evidence of who was behind it. The past 12 hours had been a masterclass in psychological warfare. After blocking her family's phone numbers, Rachel had received calls from, quote, concerned neighbors reporting suspicious activity around her apartment, utility workers needing immediate access to check gas leaks, and, quote, process servers claiming to have urgent legal documents. Each call was designed to create anxiety and force her into making impulsive decisions. But the most disturbing development had come at 3 p.m., when Rachel's building superintendent, Mrs. Chen, had knocked on her door with obvious nervousness. "Rachel dear, I'm sorry to bother you, but some very official-looking men were here asking about your lease agreement," the elderly woman had said, wringing her hands. "They said there might be issues with your background check, something about financial irregularities. They wanted copies of your rental application and emergency contact information." Rachel had thanked Mrs. Chen and immediately called her building's management company, only to learn that no such inquiry had been made. Someone was impersonating officials to gather personal information about her living situation, employment history, and family connections. Now, walking through Millennium Park toward Cloudgate, the reflective sculpture locals called the Bean, Rachel felt like she was moving through a chess game where she couldn't see all the pieces. The anonymous contact had chosen the location well, public enough to discourage violence, but with enough shadows and reflecting surfaces to make surveillance difficult. She arrived at the sculpture at exactly 9 p.m., positioning herself where she could see approaching figures from multiple directions. The October evening was crisp, and the park's lighting created an almost surreal atmosphere as tourists took selfies with the massive reflective sculpture. "Ms. Morrison." The voice came from behind her, calm and professionally neutral. Rachel turned to find a woman in her mid-40s, dressed in a dark business suit with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun. She looked like a federal agent or corporate lawyer, someone accustomed to handling sensitive information. "Who are you?" Rachel asked, her hand instinctively moving toward the recorder in her pocket. "My name is Dr. Sarah Mitchell. I'm a forensic accountant with the Department of Justice, and I've been investigating Morrison Construction Group for the past 8 months." The woman produced credentials that appeared genuine, though Rachel's adrenaline made it difficult to focus on the details. 8 months? How did you? "We received a tip from someone inside your family's operation," Dr. Mitchell interrupted, glancing around the park with practiced surveillance awareness. "Someone who's been documenting their activities and feeding us information through carefully encrypted channels." Rachel felt the ground shift beneath her. Someone inside the company is working with the Justice Department? Someone who realized that the fraud had grown beyond simple overbilling and entered into territory that threatens national security. Dr. Mitchell's expression grew grim. "Ms. Morrison, your family's construction company has been used to launder money for entities that the federal government considers threats to domestic security." The revelation hit Rachel like a physical blow. She'd uncovered evidence of fraud, but money laundering for security threats suggested her family was involved in something far more dangerous than tax evasion or overbilling government contracts. "What kind of threats?" Rachel asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know. Dr. Mitchell pulled out a tablet and showed Rachel a financial flowchart that mapped money movements through Morrison Construction's shell companies. "Your family's network has been used to clean money for an organization that's been funding infrastructure sabotage, corporate espionage, and political corruption across the Midwest." The construction contracts were just the entry point. Rachel stared at the complex diagram, recognizing some of the shell company names from her own investigation, but seeing them connected to entities she'd never encountered. Corporate espionage, infrastructure sabotage, My father builds schools and hospitals. Your father provides cover for people who want to damage schools and hospitals, Dr. Mitchell corrected. The Morrison Construction Group has been awarded contracts specifically because their work creates access to critical infrastructure. Water treatment facilities, power grid substations, government buildings, all supposedly being upgraded or repaired, but actually being mapped and potentially compromised. The implications were staggering. Every government contract Rachel had reviewed in her audit wasn't just about stealing money. It was about gaining access to critical infrastructure for people who wanted to harm the country. The person inside your family's operation has been documenting these activities for months, Dr. Mitchell continued. But we need corroborating evidence from an independent source to build a case that will hold up in federal court. Your audit findings provide exactly that corroboration. Rachel's mind raced through the possibilities. Who inside her family could be working with federal investigators? Tyler was too naive and had no access to high-level financial information. Her mother had clearly known about the fraud but seemed committed to protecting it. Uncle Frank was deeply involved in the day-to-day operations. Who is your inside source? Rachel asked. Dr. Mitchell's expression remained neutral. I can't reveal that information, but I can tell you that they've been operating under significant personal risk to document these activities. Tonight's meeting was their idea. They believed you could be trusted to do the right thing. And if I refuse to cooperate, then a lot of innocent people are going to get hurt, Dr. Mitchell said bluntly. The organization using your family's company is planning something significant, and we believe it's scheduled to happen within the next few weeks. Without your evidence, we might not be able to stop it. Rachel pulled the encrypted drive from her pocket, staring at the small device that contained enough evidence to destroy her family's life. What happens to my father and uncle if I give you this? They'll be arrested and charged with federal crimes including conspiracy, money laundering, and potentially treason, Dr. Mitchell replied without hesitation. They'll face decades in prison, and Morrison Construction Group will be seized as a criminal enterprise. And my brother? My mother? That depends on what our investigation reveals about their level of involvement. If Tyler genuinely had no knowledge of the criminal activities, he'll likely face no charges. Your mother's situation is more complex. Rachel thought about Patricia Morrison's words that morning, her careful admission that she'd known about difficult business decisions. Her mother had chosen willful ignorance in exchange for comfort, but that might still qualify as criminal conspiracy. There's something else you need to know, Dr. Mitchell said, her voice dropping to a whisper. The people your family has been working with don't tolerate loose ends. If they believe you've discovered their operation, your life is in genuine danger. Is that why you arranged this meeting? To protect me? Partly. But also because our inside source believes you're the key to exposing everything. They've been working for months to gather evidence, but they needed someone with forensic accounting expertise to connect all the pieces. Dr. Mitchell handed Rachel a business card with only a phone number printed on it. If you decide to cooperate, call that number within the next 24 hours. If you decide to stay silent, we'll understand, but we can't guarantee your safety. As Dr. Mitchell prepared to leave, Rachel called after her. The inside source. Can you at least tell me if it's someone I trust? The federal agent paused, considering her words carefully. It's someone who loves you enough to risk everything to protect you from what your family has become involved in. Someone who realized that saving you might require destroying everything you thought you knew about the people who raised you. After Dr. Mitchell disappeared into the park's shadows, Rachel remained by the reflective sculpture, watching her distorted image shift and change as she moved. The conversation had transformed her understanding of everything she'd discovered. This wasn't just about construction fraud or family loyalty. It was about national security, domestic terrorism, and people who were willing to kill to protect their secrets. The drive back to her apartment felt like traveling through a foreign country. Every familiar street, every landmark of her Chicago childhood, now seemed tainted by the knowledge that her family's business was being used to fund activities that could harm thousands of innocent people. As she pulled into her building's parking garage, Rachel noticed that the black SUV was gone. Either her watchers had followed her to Millennium Park, or they'd been replaced by someone else. The thought that multiple parties might be surveilling her movements made the simple act of walking to her apartment feel like navigating a minefield. Inside her apartment, Rachel spread Dr. Mitchell's financial flowcharts across her coffee table alongside her own audit findings. The evidence was overwhelming. Morrison Construction Group wasn't just defrauding taxpayers. It was serving as a front for domestic terrorists who were planning something that federal investigators believed could happen within the next few weeks. But the most haunting question remained: who inside her family had been working with the Justice Department for 8 months? Who had realized that the Morrison family business had become something monstrous and decided to risk everything to stop it? As Rachel stared at the evidence that could save lives but destroy her family, she realized that her choice had become much simpler and much more terrible. She could protect criminals who happened to be her family, or she could protect innocent people who might become their victims. The encrypted drive lay on her coffee table like a weapon, waiting to be aimed at the people who'd raised her to believe in truth, justice, and protecting the innocent, even when those people were the very criminals who needed to be stopped. Rachel's phone buzzed at 6:23 a.m. with a text from an unknown number. "Coffee shop on Lincoln and Fullerton. Come alone. Bring nothing. Trust me. Gash T." The single-letter signature made Rachel's heart stop. Tyler. Her younger brother was the inside source who'd been feeding information to the Department of Justice for 8 months. The revelation explained everything: his nervous behavior at Sunday dinner, his genuine confusion about the company lockdown, his careful questions about her audit findings. Tyler hadn't been naive about their family's criminal activities. He'd been documenting them. Rachel arrived at the small coffee shop 20 minutes later, her mind reeling with implications. Tyler sat in a corner booth, looking like he'd aged years in the past few days. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usually confident demeanor had been replaced by the hunched posture of someone carrying an enormous burden. "Thank God you came," Tyler said as she slid into the booth across from him. "I wasn't sure you'd trust the message." "You've been working with the feds for 8 months, Rachel said, studying her brother's face for signs of deception. 8 months, Tyler. While I was discovering fraud, you were documenting terrorism." Tyler glanced around the coffee shop nervously before leaning forward. "It started accidentally. I was working on the water treatment facility project in Aurora, and I noticed that our crew was installing monitoring equipment that wasn't on the original blueprints. When I asked the site foreman about it, he told me to mind my own business and talk to Uncle Frank." Rachel felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of monitoring equipment? Remote access systems for the facility's control networks. Equipment that would allow someone to manipulate water quality, shut down pumps, or contaminate the supply from anywhere in the world. Tyler's voice was barely above a whisper. "When I realized what we were actually installing, I started documenting everything." The coffee shop's morning rush provided cover for their conversation, but Rachel felt exposed nonetheless. If Tyler had been feeding information to federal investigators, there was no telling who else might be watching them. "How did you contact the Justice Department?" Rachel asked. "I didn't. They contacted me." Tyler pulled out his phone and showed Rachel a series of encrypted messages. "About 6 months ago, I started receiving texts from someone who knew exactly what I'd been documenting. They knew about the monitoring equipment, the shell companies, even Dad's private meetings with people I'd never seen before." Rachel scanned the messages, recognizing the same professional tone and security awareness she'd encountered with Dr. Mitchell. "They recruited you." "They saved me from becoming an accessory to domestic terrorism," Tyler corrected. "Rachel, what our family is involved in, it's not just fraud. There are people using Morrison Construction to access critical infrastructure across 3 states. Water systems, power grids, transportation networks, all being compromised under the cover of legitimate construction contracts." Dr. Mitchell mentioned infrastructure sabotage. "What exactly are they planning?" Tyler's expression grew grim. "From what I've been able to piece together, it's coordinated. Multiple targets, multiple states, all designed to create maximum disruption during a specific time window." "When?" "Election Day, November 5th. 3 weeks from now." The revelation hit Rachel like a physical blow. Election Day attacks on infrastructure would create chaos, potentially disrupting voting, emergency services, and public safety across the Midwest. The scope of destruction could affect millions of people. That's why Dr. Mitchell said we only had weeks, Rachel said, the pieces falling into place. They're planning to disrupt the election, Tyler nodded grimly. Power outages, water contamination, communication disruptions, all designed to create fear and chaos when people are trying to vote. And our family's company has provided access to make it all possible. Rachel stared at her coffee, watching steam rise from the surface as she processed the magnitude of what Tyler was telling her. Their father and uncle weren't just criminals. They were traitors who were helping foreign actors or domestic terrorists attack American democracy. Tyler, how much does Dad actually know about the bigger picture? Rachel asked. Is he a willing participant in terrorism, or is he just focused on the money? That's the question I've been trying to answer for months, Tyler replied. I think Dad started out just taking money for what he thought were simple contract modifications. But over time, the people he's working with have gained more and more control over the company's operations. And Uncle Frank? Tyler's expression darkened. Frank knows everything. He's the one who meets with the handlers, coordinates the installations, and ensures that our crews follow the modified blueprints. Dad might be in denial about what he's enabling, but Frank is a true believer. Rachel felt sick thinking about her uncle, the man who'd taught her to ride a bike and helped her with math homework, actively participating in plans to attack American infrastructure. What about Mom? Rachel asked, though she dreaded the answer. Mom knows enough to be terrified, but not enough to understand the full scope, Tyler said. She's been trying to convince Dad to retire and sell the company for the past year. I think she senses that they're involved in something dangerous, but Dad keeps telling her that they're too committed to back out now. The family dynamics were becoming clearer. William Morrison was a man in over his head, controlled by forces he no longer understood. Frank Morrison was a willing collaborator. Patricia Morrison was a frightened accomplice. And Tyler had been risking his life for months to document their crimes. Why didn't you come to me sooner? Rachel asked. Why let me discover this through my audit? Tyler's expression filled with pain. Because I needed someone with forensic accounting skills to validate what I'd been documenting. The feds have been building a case, but they needed independent corroboration from a credible source. When Dad specifically requested you for the audit, it seemed like providence. Dad requested me for the audit knowing what you've been documenting? Dad requested you because he genuinely believes the company's books are clean, Tyler corrected. He's compartmentalized the legitimate business from the criminal activities so thoroughly that he probably convinced himself there was nothing for you to find. Rachel's phone buzzed with an incoming call from her father's number. She showed the screen to Tyler, who shook his head urgently. Don't answer. He's been trying to reach me all morning, too. I think he's starting to suspect that someone inside the company has been talking to outsiders. What happens if he figures out it's you? Tyler's silence answered the question. Rachel realized that her younger brother had been living under a death sentence for months. Knowing that discovery would mean not just prosecution, but potential murder by the people using their family's company. Tyler, we need to get you somewhere safe. If Dad or Frank realizes you're the leak. I'm not going anywhere until this is finished. Tyler interrupted with surprising steel in his voice. Too many people are depending on us to stop what's planned for Election Day. Besides, the feds have been watching me. If something happens to me, it'll trigger the entire operation. Rachel studied her brother's face, seeing a maturity and resolve she'd never noticed before. Tyler had grown up over the past 8 months, transformed from a naive college graduate into someone willing to risk everything to protect his country from his own family. What do you need from me? Rachel asked. Your audit findings, combined with my documentation, will give the Justice Department everything they need to arrest Dad, Frank, and their handlers, Tyler said. But we need to act fast. The feds believe the attacks are scheduled for Election Day, which means the final preparations are happening now. And our family? Tyler's expression grew sad. Our family stopped existing the moment Dad decided that money was more important than morality. What we have now is a criminal conspiracy that happens to share our DNA. Rachel felt the weight of that truth settling over her. The Morrison family she'd grown up loving was gone, replaced by something monstrous that wore the faces of people she'd trusted. "There's one more thing," Tyler said, his voice dropping to barely audible. "The people Dad and Frank are working with. They're not just planning to attack infrastructure. They're planning to attack specific targets where they know the disruptions will cause maximum casualties." "What kind of targets?" "Hospitals, schools, nursing homes, places where power outages and water contamination will kill people, not just inconvenience them." Tyler's voice broke slightly. "Rachel, we're not just talking about election disruption. We're talking about mass murder." The coffee shop around them continued its normal morning routine, customers ordering lattes and discussing their daily plans, completely unaware that two siblings were discussing preventing one of the largest domestic terror attacks in American history. Rachel pulled out Dr. Mitchell's business card, staring at the simple phone number that represented her last chance to do the right thing. In a few hours, she would either help prevent mass murder or become complicit in her family's crimes through inaction. "When I call this number," Rachel said, "there's no going back. Dad and Frank will go to prison. The Morrison name will be destroyed. Everything we grew up believing about our family will be exposed as a lie." Tyler reached across the table and took his sister's hand. "Rachel, the Morrison name was destroyed the moment our father chose to help terrorists kill innocent people. Now we get to decide whether we're going to be part of the solution or part of the problem." As Rachel stared at the phone number that would end her family's criminal enterprise, she realized that Tyler had already made the hardest choice. Now it was her turn to decide whether she had the courage to follow his example. At 2:17 p.m., Rachel Morrison sat in her car outside the Federal Building in downtown Chicago, Dr. Mitchell's business card trembling in her hand. The encrypted USB drive containing her audit findings lay on the passenger seat beside a manila envelope filled with Tyler's documentation of the infrastructure compromises. Together, these files represented enough evidence to prevent a domestic terror attack but destroy what remained of her family. She'd been sitting in the parking garage for 23 minutes, paralyzed by the magnitude of the choice before her. Through the concrete pillars, she could see office workers returning from lunch breaks, tourists photographing the Chicago River, families pushing strollers through the autumn afternoon, all of them blissfully unaware that their safety depended on a decision being made by a woman who felt completely unprepared for such responsibility. Rachel's phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Any word from the family? Dad's been calling everyone, including Amanda. He knows something's wrong." The mention of Tyler's girlfriend made Rachel's stomach clench. Amanda was an elementary school teacher with no connection to the Morrison family's criminal activities. But she was now potentially in danger, simply because she'd been dating Tyler when everything unraveled. How many innocent people would be hurt if Rachel chose family loyalty over justice? How many more would die if she chose justice but acted too late? Her phone rang with a call from an unknown number. Rachel almost ignored it, but something made her answer. "Ms. Morrison, this is Agent Victoria Sterling with the FBI. Dr. Mitchell asked me to contact you. We understand you may have information relevant to an ongoing domestic security investigation." The voice was crisp, professional, and carried an urgency that cut through Rachel's paralysis. "Agent Sterling, I need to know what happens to my family if I cooperate. Ms. Morrison, I can't make promises about outcomes, but I can tell you that every day we delay increases the risk to innocent civilians. Our intelligence suggests that final preparations for the November 5th attacks are entering their critical phase." Rachel felt tears building behind her eyes. "My father, I don't think he fully understands what he's involved in. Is there any possibility of leniency if he cooperates?" The pause that followed told Rachel everything she needed to know about her father's prospects. "Ms. Morrison, your father has been accepting payments to compromise critical infrastructure for over 2 years. Regardless of his level of understanding about the ultimate goals, his actions have enabled what we believe will be one of the largest domestic terror attacks in American history. The Justice Department takes that very seriously." Rachel closed her eyes, seeing her father's face at countless family dinners, his pride when she graduated college, his genuine affection during their monthly business lunches. That man was about to be revealed as someone who'd helped terrorists plan mass murder. "What about my mother? She wasn't directly involved in the business operations." "That will depend on what our investigation reveals about her knowledge and participation. But Ms. Morrison, we're running out of time to prevent civilian casualties. I need to know if you're prepared to cooperate." Rachel opened her eyes and stared at the federal building where her decision would either save lives or destroy her family. Agent Sterling, if I come in now, can you guarantee that the attacks will be prevented? I can guarantee that without your cooperation, we may not be able to prevent them. Your brother's documentation is valuable, but we need the financial evidence from your audit to build ironclad cases against everyone involved. The weight of responsibility settled on Rachel's shoulders like lead. Hundreds, possibly thousands of lives depended on her willingness to betray the people who'd raised her. But those same people had chosen to enable mass murder for money. I'll be there in 10 minutes, Rachel said finally. Ms. Morrison, thank you, you're doing the right thing. As Rachel ended the call, her phone immediately buzzed with an incoming call from her father. This time she answered. Rachel, thank God. William Morrison's voice carried a desperation she'd never heard before. Sweetheart, where are you? We need to talk immediately. There are some very serious people asking questions about our business, and I need to know what you told them. Dad, I haven't told anyone anything yet, Rachel said, technically truthful since she hadn't yet met with federal agents. Yet? Rachel, what do you mean yet? Your family. We protect each other, no matter what. The phrase that had guided Rachel's entire childhood now sounded like a demand to become an accessory to terrorism. Dad, what exactly am I supposed to be protecting you from? From people who don't understand the complexities of modern business, who want to criminalize legitimate entrepreneurship. William's voice was gaining the forceful confidence he used in business negotiations. Rachel, I need you to come home right now. We're going to sit down as a family and discuss how to handle this situation. What about Tyler? Is he part of this family discussion? The pause that followed was loaded with implications Rachel didn't want to consider. Tyler is dealing with some personal issues right now, William said carefully. He's been under a lot of stress, making some poor decisions about who to trust, but we're going to help him through this. Rachel felt ice in her veins. Her father's tone suggested that Tyler's cooperation with federal investigators had been discovered. Dad, what kind of help does Tyler need? The kind that ensures he understands the importance of family loyalty. Rachel, I need you to come home now. Don't talk to anyone, don't meet with anyone, just come straight home. Rachel ended the call and immediately tried Tyler's number. It went straight to voicemail. She tried 3 more times with the same result. Either Tyler's phone was dead or someone had taken it from him. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your brother is safe but needs your help. Come home and we can resolve this as a family. Any contact with outside authorities will have consequences for everyone you care about. CRAF. Frank Morrison was now directly threatening her through text messages. The careful pretense of legitimate business had been abandoned, replaced by naked intimidation. Rachel realized that her family's transformation from successful entrepreneurs to desperate criminals was now complete. But the message also confirmed that Tyler was alive, at least for now. Rachel's cooperation with federal authorities might save thousands of strangers, but it would almost certainly doom her brother. The people her family was working with didn't tolerate loose ends, and Tyler had been documenting their activities for months. Rachel stared at the federal building, knowing that Agent Sterling and Dr. Mitchell were waiting inside with the resources to prevent mass murder. Then she looked at her phone, where threatening messages from her uncle suggested that Tyler's life hung in the balance. The choice was no longer between family loyalty and moral obligation. It was between saving strangers and saving her brother. Between preventing mass casualties and protecting the one person in her family who'd already chosen to do the right thing. As Rachel sat in her car, paralyzed by impossible choices, her phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed Tyler's number. Rachel? Tyler's voice was strained, barely above a whisper. I can't talk long. They have me at Dad's house, but I convinced them to let me call you. Tyler, are you hurt? Not yet. But Rachel, listen to me carefully. You need to give the feds everything we've documented. Everything. Don't worry about me. Worry about the people who'll die if these attacks happen. Tyler, I can't sacrifice you to save strangers. Yes, you can. Because that's what people with integrity do. They choose what's right over what's comfortable, even when the cost is unthinkable. Rachel heard voices in the background of Tyler's call. Male voices speaking in urgent, threatening tones. "I have to go," Tyler whispered. "Rachel, I love you. Do the right thing." The line went dead, leaving Rachel staring at her phone in the parking garage of the federal building. Her brother, the person who'd been brave enough to document terrorism for 8 months, was now a hostage. But he'd used what might be his last phone call to urge her to cooperate with the investigation that could save thousands of lives. Rachel picked up the USB drive and Tyler's documentation, holding the evidence that would either prevent mass murder or cost her brother his life. The autumn sun was beginning to set over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded her of fire. As she walked toward the federal building, Rachel Morrison carried with her the crushing knowledge that doing the right thing sometimes required accepting consequences too terrible to contemplate. But Tyler's final words echoed in her mind. People with integrity choose what's right over what's comfortable, even when the cost is unthinkable. The glass doors of the federal building reflected her image as she approached, a woman about to make a choice that would define not just her future, but her understanding of what it meant to be truly courageous. Behind those doors waited federal agents with the power to prevent mass murder. Behind her lay a family that had chosen money over morality and was now threatening anyone who dared to expose their crimes. Rachel Morrison pushed through the glass doors, carrying evidence that would save lives and destroy everything she'd once believed about the people who raised her. But as the doors closed behind her, she realized that Tyler had taught her something their parents never could, that real family isn't defined by shared blood, but by shared values. And sometimes, protecting those values requires sacrificing everything else. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, ready to carry her toward a decision that would prevent mass murder, but might cost her brother's life. As Rachel stepped inside, she understood that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was doing what needed to be done despite being terrified of the consequences. The FBI conference room on the 18th floor of the federal building felt like a war room. Maps of Chicago, Milwaukee, and Detroit covered the walls, marked with red pins indicating compromised infrastructure sites. Agent Victoria Sterling sat across from Rachel, while Dr. Mitchell operated a laptop displaying financial flow charts that connected Morrison Construction to a network spanning 3 states. The evidence Rachel had provided was being analyzed in real time by a team of federal investigators working against an election day deadline that was now just 19 days away. "Ms. Morrison, your brother's documentation combined with your financial analysis has given us the complete picture," Agent Sterling said, her voice carrying both gratitude and urgency. "We now know the scope of the planned attacks, the funding sources, and most importantly, the identities of the operational leadership." Rachel stared at surveillance photographs spread across the conference table. Her father and uncle appeared in several images, meeting with men in expensive suits whose faces had been circled in red marker. These were the handlers Tyler had mentioned, the people who'd transformed Morrison Construction from a legitimate business into a front for domestic terrorism. "The man your father has been taking orders from is Viktor Kozlov," Dr. Mitchell said, pointing to a photograph of a silver-haired man in his 50s. "He's a former intelligence operative who's been building networks to destabilize American infrastructure for the past 5 years. Your family's company was just one piece of a much larger operation." Rachel felt sick looking at the photograph. Her father, the man who'd taught her about integrity and hard work, had been taking orders from a foreign operative planning to kill American civilians. "What about Tyler?" Rachel asked. "Have you been able to locate him?" Agent Sterling's expression grew troubled. "We've had the Morrison family home under surveillance since you contacted us 3 hours ago. We've observed several vehicles arriving and departing, but we haven't been able to confirm your brother's location without risking his safety. Which means you're not going to rescue him. Ms. Morrison, any premature action could trigger the acceleration of the planned attacks. We have 18 other sites across 3 states that are currently rigged for infrastructure sabotage. If Kozlov's network realizes we're moving against them, they could activate everything immediately." Rachel understood the terrible calculus. Tyler's life was being weighed against the lives of potentially thousands of civilians. The federal agents couldn't risk triggering mass casualties to save one person, even if that person was the whistleblower who'd made their investigation possible. There is another option, Dr. Mitchell said carefully. We could arrange for you to return home wearing surveillance equipment. If you could get close enough to confirm Tyler's location and the identities of everyone present, we might be able to coordinate a tactical operation. You want me to go back and pretend I'm choosing family loyalty over cooperation, Rachel said, understanding immediately. It would be extremely dangerous, Agent Sterling warned. These people have killed to protect their operation. If they suspect you're working with us. Rachel's phone buzzed with an incoming call from her father's number. Agent Sterling nodded for her to answer, while technicians scrambled to activate recording equipment. Rachel, thank God. William Morrison's voice carried a relief that seemed genuine. Sweetheart, where are you? We've been worried sick. I'm downtown, Dad. I've been thinking about our conversation. And what have you decided? Rachel looked at Agent Sterling, who held up a notepad with talking points written in red ink. Keep them talking. Find out Tyler's location. Don't mention federal investigation. I've decided that family comes first, Rachel said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. But I need to know that Tyler is safe before I come home. Of course he's safe. He's here with us, helping us figure out how to protect the family business from these false accusations. Can I talk to him? He's resting right now. The stress of the situation has been hard on him. But Rachel, we need you to come home immediately. There are some people here who want to meet you, to discuss how we can resolve this situation to everyone's satisfaction. Agent Sterling shook her head vigorously, writing, quote, "Too dangerous" in large letters on her notepad. Dad, I'll come home, but I need some assurance that we're all going to be safe. These people asking questions about the business, they seem very serious. They are serious, which is why we need to handle this carefully. Rachel, I need you to understand something. The people we've been working with, they're not Americans. They don't understand our legal system or our family values. If they think we've betrayed their trust... William's voice trailed off, but the implication was clear. Kozlov's network was prepared to eliminate anyone who threatened their operation, including the Morrison family members who'd served their purposes. I'll be there in an hour, Rachel said finally. Good girl. And Rachel? Don't bring anything with you. No documents, no recordings, no electronics except your phone. These people are very careful about security. After ending the call, Rachel found herself surrounded by federal agents debating the risks of sending her into what was clearly a trap. Agent Sterling argued that Rachel's safety couldn't be guaranteed. Dr. Mitchell countered that they might not get another opportunity to locate Tyler and identify the operational leadership. It's my choice, Rachel said, cutting through their discussion. Tyler risked his life for months to document these crimes. I'm not going to abandon him now. Ms. Morrison, you need to understand that if something goes wrong, we might not be able to extract you immediately, Agent Sterling warned. The tactical team will be positioned nearby, but these people are professionals. They've chosen the Morrison family home specifically because it's an isolated location with multiple escape routes. Rachel thought about Tyler's final phone call, his insistence that she prioritize preventing the attacks over saving him. But she also thought about 8 months of courage that had brought them to this point. Her brother had already sacrificed everything to expose their family's crimes. She couldn't sacrifice him again to protect her own safety. What kind of surveillance equipment? Rachel asked. Dr. Mitchell produced a device that looked like an ordinary button from a business suit. Audio and GPS tracking. It'll transmit to our monitoring station, allowing us to track your location and record conversations. But it has limitations. If they search you thoroughly or use electronic countermeasures, they'll find it, Rachel finished. Then I go in without surveillance equipment. Absolutely not, Agent Sterling said. If we can't monitor the situation, we won't know when or how to intervene. Rachel felt the weight of an impossible situation settling over her. Every option carried unacceptable risks. Going in with surveillance equipment that could be discovered, going in without backup communication, or abandoning Tyler to save herself, and hoping the federal agents could prevent the attacks without his help. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Tyler's number. Rachel, I'm scared. Please come home. They're talking about things I don't understand. T. But something about the message felt wrong. Tyler had never called her Rachel in text messages. He'd always used Rach or sis. The formal language and frightened tone didn't match his personality, even under extreme stress. "This message isn't from Tyler," Rachel said, showing it to the federal agents. "Someone else sent this using his phone." Agent Sterling studied the message with growing concern. "They're trying to manipulate you into coming home by making you think your brother is falling apart, which suggests they need you there for something specific." "What could they need me for?" Dr. Mitchell pulled up a map of Chicago showing Morrison Construction's current projects. "Look at this. 3 of the sites we've identified as compromised infrastructure are projects that require sign-off from a licensed forensic accountant before final payments are released." Rachel stared at the map, understanding dawning with horrible clarity. "They need my signature to complete the sabotage installations. That's why they want me to come home and, quote, resolve this situation. They need me to approve the final payments for equipment that will be used to kill people on Election Day. Which means Tyler is leveraged to ensure your cooperation," Agent Sterling concluded. "They're not just holding him hostage, they're planning to force you to participate in the final stages of the attack." The conference room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. Rachel wasn't just being asked to choose between Tyler's safety and federal cooperation. She was being asked to actively participate in completing the infrastructure sabotage that would enable mass casualties. "There's something else," Dr. Mitchell said, her voice grim. "If they're moving to the final authorization phase, it means they're preparing to eliminate loose ends. Once you sign those payments and the installations are complete." "They'll kill Tyler and me both," Rachel finished. "We know too much, and we're no longer useful." Agent Sterling leaned forward. "Ms. Morrison, there's no scenario where going home ends well for you or your brother. These people are preparing to commit mass murder. They're not going to leave witnesses." Rachel stared at the surveillance photographs, the financial records, and the maps showing compromised infrastructure across 3 states. Somewhere in that web of evidence was Tyler, being held by people who planned to kill him regardless of whether she cooperated. But there was also the possibility that federal agents could use her cooperation to finally locate and neutralize Kozlov's entire network before Election Day. Tyler had already proven that the Morrison family could produce people willing to sacrifice everything to protect innocent lives. "Agent Sterling," Rachel said finally, "if I go home and sign those authorizations while wearing surveillance equipment, can you guarantee that you'll be able to arrest everyone involved before they can activate the sabotage?" "I can guarantee that we'll try, but I can't guarantee that Tyler will survive the operation." Rachel closed her eyes, hearing Tyler's voice from their coffee shop meeting. "Too many people are depending on us to stop what's planned for Election Day." He'd already made his choice. Now it was time for her to make hers. "How long do I have before I need to leave for the house?" Rachel asked. "If you're determined to do this, we need to move within the next hour," Agent Sterling replied. "After dark, our tactical teams won't have visual confirmation of the situation inside the house." Rachel Morrison looked around the conference room one last time, at the federal agents who were trying to prevent mass murder, at the evidence that proved her family had betrayed everything she'd been raised to believe, and at the photographs of Tyler, who'd risked everything to do the right thing. In 1 hour, she would either help complete her family's transformation into terrorists, or she would help federal agents prevent one of the largest domestic attacks in American history. Either way, the Morrison family she'd grown up loving would cease to exist. But Tyler had taught her that sometimes, destroying something corrupt was the only way to save what was truly worth preserving. At 7:43 p.m., Rachel Morrison drove through the wrought iron gates of her family's Winnetka estate for what she knew would be the last time. The autumn evening cast long shadows across the manicured grounds where she'd played as a child, but now the familiar landscape felt like a battlefield. Hidden beneath her Navy business suit, federal surveillance equipment transmitted her location to tactical teams positioned throughout the neighborhood. In her briefcase lay the authorization documents that could either complete a terrorist plot or provide the final evidence needed to destroy it. The circular driveway held 4 vehicles she didn't recognize. 2 black SUVs with tinted windows, a silver Mercedes with diplomatic plates, and a white van with Illinois utility company markings that looked too clean to be legitimate. Rachel counted at least 6 men moving through the shadows around the house, their positions and movements suggesting military or intelligence training. William Morrison opened the front door before Rachel could knock, his face a mask of relief and barely controlled fear. "Thank God you came home, sweetheart. We were starting to worry that you'd made some very poor decisions." The house felt different as Rachel stepped inside. Furniture had been moved to create clear sight lines, and she could hear multiple conversations in languages she didn't recognize coming from the living room. This wasn't her childhood home anymore. It was an operational headquarters for people planning mass murder. "Where's Tyler?" Rachel asked immediately. "Safe," Frank Morrison said, emerging from the kitchen with a man Rachel recognized from the surveillance photographs. Victor Kozlov looked exactly like what he was, a former intelligence operative, comfortable with violence and completely without conscience. His pale blue eyes studied Rachel, with the calculating gaze of someone evaluating her usefulness. "Ms. Morrison," Kozlov said, his accent barely detectable but his tone carrying absolute authority. "Your family speaks very highly of your professional skills. We have some documents that require your expertise." Rachel forced herself to remain calm despite every instinct screaming at her to run. "I'd like to see my brother first." Kozlov smiled, but the expression carried no warmth. "Of course. Family should always come first." He gestured toward the staircase leading to the second floor. "Mr. Morrison is upstairs, reviewing some technical specifications for tomorrow's work." The casual mention of tomorrow's work sent ice through Rachel's veins. These people were planning to activate their sabotage equipment within 24 hours, weeks ahead of the Election Day timeline federal agents had anticipated. Tyler sat in what used to be Rachel's childhood bedroom, hunched over a laptop with 2 men standing behind him. Her brother looked up as she entered, and Rachel saw a mixture of relief and terror in his eyes. But she also saw something else: determination. Tyler had spent 8 months documenting these people's activities. And even now, as a hostage, he was still gathering intelligence. "Rachel," Tyler said, his voice carefully controlled, "I'm glad you're here. These gentlemen have been explaining some very interesting technical details about the company's recent projects." One of Tyler's guards, a heavy-set man with Slavic features, gestured impatiently at the laptop screen. "Your brother has been very helpful in explaining the infrastructure access points. Now we need you to authorize the final equipment installations." Rachel moved closer to the laptop, pretending to study the screen while actually looking for any way to communicate with Tyler without alerting their captors. The laptop displayed detailed schematics of Chicago's water treatment facilities, with highlighted access points where Morrison Construction had installed what appeared to be standard monitoring equipment, but were actually remote access nodes for cyber attacks. "The installations look complete," Rachel said carefully. "What additional authorizations do you need?" "Payment releases," Kozlov said, entering the room with William and Frank Morrison trailing behind him. "Your signature is required to release final payments to the subcontractors who installed our specialized equipment. Once those payments are processed, our work will be complete." Rachel understood immediately. The payment authorizations would trigger the release of funds to shell companies controlled by Kozlov's network. But more importantly, they would create an official paper trail showing that she had approved the installation of equipment that would be used for mass murder. If the attack succeeded, she would be implicated as a co-conspirator. If they failed, she would still face criminal charges for authorizing terrorist infrastructure. "I'll need to review the contracts and invoices before signing anything," Rachel said, playing for time while hoping the federal surveillance equipment was capturing everything. "Of course," Kozlov replied, "but we are operating under a tight timeline. The equipment must be activated by 6 a.m. tomorrow morning to coordinate with similar operations in Milwaukee and Detroit, 6 a.m. The attacks weren't scheduled for Election Day. They were happening in less than 10 hours. Rachel felt panic rising, but forced herself to remain professional. The federal tactical teams needed time to coordinate a response across 3 cities. "What happens at 6 a.m.? Tyler asked, his voice carrying what sounded like genuine curiosity. one of the guards laughed. Rush hour water contamination, power grid failures, and communication blackouts. By 8 a.m., 3 cities will be in complete chaos. Emergency services overwhelmed, hospitals without power, schools evacuated. Perfect conditions for the next phase of operations. Rachel felt sick. These people weren't just planning infrastructure attacks. They were creating conditions for something even worse. Next phase? Kozlov's expression grew cold. That information is not relevant to your current responsibilities, Ms. Morrison. Please focus on the authorizations. Frank Morrison handed Rachel a folder containing payment authorization forms, his hands shaking slightly. Rachel, these are standard releases for work that's already been completed, just routine paperwork. Rachel opened the folder, scanning documents that authorized payments totaling $3.2 million to various shell companies. But buried in the technical specifications, she recognized equipment that had nothing to do with construction, advanced cyber warfare tools, remote detonation devices, and biological contamination systems. Uncle Frank, Rachel said, looking directly at him, do you understand what this equipment actually does? Frank's face went pale, and for the first time, Rachel saw genuine fear in his eyes. It's monitoring equipment, infrastructure upgrades. It's equipment designed to kill civilians, Rachel said flatly. Water contamination systems that will poison children. Power grid attacks that will shut down hospitals. You're not upgrading infrastructure. You're turning it into weapons. The room fell silent except for the sound of Kozlov slowly clapping his hands. Very good, Ms. Morrison. Your forensic accounting skills are indeed impressive. You understand exactly what we've built using your family's company. William Morrison stepped forward, his face a mask of horrified realization. Victor, you said this was about industrial espionage. Corporate intelligence gathering. You never mentioned civilian casualties. Kozlov's laugh was genuinely amused. Mr. Morrison, did you really believe that we were paying you millions of dollars just to steal corporate secrets? Did you think foreign intelligence services invest in elaborate infrastructure access for industrial espionage? Rachel watched her father's face as the full scope of his betrayal became clear. William Morrison had been so focused on the money and so committed to compartmentalizing his actions that he'd never allowed himself to understand the ultimate consequences of his choices. But you said, William began. I said many things, Kozlov interrupted. I told you what you needed to hear to ensure your cooperation. But the time for deception is over. Tomorrow morning we demonstrate to the American people that their infrastructure is vulnerable, their government is incompetent, and their way of life can be destroyed by a small group of dedicated professionals. Tyler looked up from the laptop with sudden understanding. This isn't about Election Day disruption. This is about creating a pretext for martial law. You're trying to destabilize American democracy by making it look like the government can't protect its own citizens. Kozlov nodded approvingly. Your brother is quite intelligent, Ms. Morrison. Yes, tomorrow's attacks will create the conditions necessary for much more significant political changes. When 3 American cities are simultaneously crippled by infrastructure failures, certain political leaders will have the justification they need to implement emergency measures that would otherwise be unacceptable to the American public. Rachel felt the pieces falling into place. This wasn't just foreign terrorism. This was a coordinated effort involving domestic political figures who wanted to use manufactured chaos to justify authoritarian responses. The Morrison family's construction company had been used to build the infrastructure for a coup. I won't sign these authorizations, Rachel said, closing the folder with finality. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Kozlov's expression shifted from professional courtesy to something much more dangerous. Ms. Morrison, I think you misunderstand your situation, he said quietly. You and your brother have 2 choices. Authorize the payments and walk away with enough money to disappear anywhere in the world, or refuse to cooperate and become unfortunate casualties of tomorrow's attacks. There's a third choice, Rachel said, meeting his gaze directly. We can stop you, Kozlov smiled. With what? Your moral indignation? Your family values? Ms. Morrison, you are surrounded by professional killers, in a house miles from any help. Your federal contacts have no idea where you are or what we're planning. Rachel pulled out her phone, holding it up so Kozlov could see the screen. For the past 20 minutes, she'd been running a live video stream directly to the FBI's monitoring station. Every word of Kozlov's confession, every detail of the planned attacks, every threat against American civilians had been recorded and transmitted in real time. Actually, Rachel said, they know exactly where we are and exactly what you're planning. And they've been listening to every word. The sound of helicopters filled the night air, followed by the crash of windows breaking as federal tactical teams deployed flashbang grenades throughout the house. In the chaos that followed, Rachel grabbed Tyler and pulled him behind an overturned dresser as gunfire erupted from multiple directions. The battle for the Morrison family home lasted exactly 17 minutes. When the smoke cleared, Viktor Kozlov and 3 of his operatives were dead. 4 others, including the men who'd been guarding Tyler, were in federal custody. William Morrison sat in the corner of Rachel's childhood bedroom, staring at his hands in shock. Frank Morrison was being treated for a gunshot wound to his shoulder, while federal agents read him his rights. As paramedics checked Tyler for injuries, he grabbed Rachel's hand. Did they get all the sites? Chicago, Milwaukee, Detroit? Agent Sterling, appearing in the doorway with her tactical vest still smoking from a near miss, nodded grimly. Simultaneous raids across 3 states. We've secured all 18 infrastructure sites and arrested 43 individuals. The attacks have been prevented. Rachel felt tears streaming down her face as the magnitude of what they'd accomplished sank in. Tyler's 8 months of courage, her own choice to cooperate with federal investigators, and the sacrifice of everything they'd believed about their family had saved thousands of lives. What happens now? Tyler asked. Agent Sterling's expression grew somber. Your father and uncle will face federal charges including conspiracy, treason, and providing material support to terrorism. Your mother will likely face lesser charges related to money laundering. But you two are heroes. As federal agents secured the scene and gathered evidence, Rachel and Tyler stood together in the wreckage of their family home. Everything they'd grown up believing about the Morrison family had been destroyed, but something more important had been preserved. Their understanding that some principles are worth any sacrifice. 6 months later, Rachel Morrison testified before a Senate committee investigating foreign interference in American infrastructure. Her testimony, combined with Tyler's documentation, led to new federal regulations governing construction contracts and infrastructure security. William Morrison was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Frank Morrison received 30 years. Patricia Morrison pleaded guilty to money laundering charges and received a 5-year suspended sentence in exchange for her cooperation with ongoing investigations. Tyler returned to Northwestern to complete a master's degree in cybersecurity, focusing on infrastructure protection. Rachel accepted a position with the Department of Homeland Security, leading a new task force dedicated to preventing the kind of infiltration that had corrupted her family's business. The Morrison Construction Group was dissolved, its assets seized to compensate victims of the infrastructure compromises. But the Morrison name lived on in a different way. Tyler and Rachel kept it, transformed from a symbol of corruption into a reminder that courage sometimes requires destroying everything you thought you knew about the people you love. On November 5th, Election Day, Tyler and Rachel voted together in a Chicago polling station powered by secure electrical grids and supplied by clean water systems. As they walked out into the autumn sunshine, Tyler squeezed his sister's hand. Think Dad would be proud of what we did? He asked. Rachel considered the question, thinking about the man who'd taught her about integrity before forgetting those lessons himself. I think the father who raised us to value truth over comfort would be proud, she said finally. The question is whether we can live up to the values he taught us, even when he couldn't. They walked away from the polling station together. 2 siblings who'd learned that the greatest act of family loyalty is sometimes refusing to let the people you love become monsters. Behind them, thousands of voters cast their ballots in a democracy that remained free, because 2 young people had chosen justice over family, truth over comfort, and the lives of strangers over the approval of the people who'd raised them. The Morrison family business was gone, but the Morrison family values, the real ones, not the corrupted version that had enabled terrorism, lived on in the next generation. And sometimes, that's the only victory that really matters. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.